So Sol LeWitt is known as one of the most important conceptual minimalist artists. He became most well known in the 1960s.
I remember his early sculptures that I would see, and they were cubes, essentially just like the frames of cubes. And there were many of them, so they seemed to be very uniform. And in doing so, even though it is this really rigid shape, this really rigid way of going about doing something, there's something that kind of fails in the end to hold that mechanical edge. And in fact, it probably introduces a certain amount of uncertainty.
Although we had 77 works of LeWitt's in our collection, we did not have a wall drawing. But this gift was given to us by Pitney Bowes. And when we received it, we were delighted. What is important to know about LeWitt is that it's all about the idea. He creates instructions, and then those instructions drive the work of art. And LeWitt famously would make a set of instructions and then liberate the work of art for its installation. So when we received the work, we received a set of instructions, but they are quite simple.
Now, a lot of times when we're thinking of art, we think of these individuals who are making this one thing by themselves, all alone in their studio, but that was not always true. I mean, if you go back to medieval times and previous, what you would have is you would have entire studios of people doing with one master who's kind of directing the hands of all his assistants. And in some ways, that kind of ancient tradition has been carried on just by Sol LeWitt, by giving very specific kind of instructions, and he does have very specific instructions for how you are to approach this using specific paints, using specific mixes, using specific ways of applying that paint, specific dimensions, and how the wall has to look.
He's the master of what I would say a formal precision. The work is very precise, but the fact that it's handmade, hand-drawn, hand-painted, gives it this intellectual tension. You know that the work is driven by a very rigorous set of ideas, but there's a warmth to it.
We are hand inking over it. It's not sprayed on, it's not, put on by a machine, it's put on by people trying to maintain this balance of these really rigid shapes with how human beings are. You can see individual strokes, but they kind of get lost because of the layering of them. And yet the shapes themselves are pretty rigid, and even the colors themselves are kind of rigid. You just have your primary colors. And yet there is a kind of complexity over that building by layers, that these simple shapes take on a much richer kind of depth.
In some ways, the Sol LeWitt drawing 519 is especially appropriate to have outside the museum because one of the principles of LeWitt's work is to utilize the wall, to adapt to the situation, so that there is no object involved. It is actually the wall as part of the work. So with the new architectural structure of the business school, it seemed a very appropriate place to put the LeWitt. LeWitt famously said that the idea is the machine that makes the art. And I like thinking about business as a way that art comes into being sometimes. So for me, the idea of it being at the business school is very much in line with how it should operate in the world. It doesn't really belong to anyone. It's there for everyone to enjoy, and especially the placement in the business school, I think, will allow for understanding and power of that work both on the inside and from people looking from the outside. The LeWitt that is here, drawing 519, embodies particularly the beauty of mathematics and elemental form. So it's that discovery that forms can actually represent and present abstract and representational ideas at the same time. We also know that LeWitt loved Bach and LeWitt loved Mozart. He loved structure, and I think from looking at drawing 519, you have a sense of not only the expressive quality of his conceptual art, but also the logic and structure.